Good evening, everyone. Hopefully,
good evening.
Yeah, hello, Achim. Good evening, everybody else in the chat. I see there's a few people talking away there. Hopefully, everybody can hear the two of us okay.
Yeah, that would be great if we get some feedback, because I can't hear Dom very well, actually quite bad.
Yeah, there's some people chatting. Oh, sound is good, somebody's just said. So
sounds good. Stefan, how can you say that? Okay.
That's great. Okay, well, in that case, thank you very much to everybody for joining it, and most of all, thank you, Achim, for joining as well. That's it's really appreciated, and I hope, guys, that you enjoy this as much as I think we're going to as well. So, I guess just before we start, I've just got a couple of things to kind of say, if if you don't mind. So the first thing is we've not done this before, so please bear with us if there are problems. If there's problems with the sound, or if you have a question that we don't get to, please bear with us. What we will do is we'll go through the chat at the end, and we will anything that we haven't covered, we'll cover either in another one of these or some other way of doing it. So you won't get forgotten. I'm glad that somebody has already pointed out that we've both got the same hairstyle.
Yes, actually, we figured out there's way more things we have in common, right? Except for the beautiful haircut.
There's a whole load of things. I think we're about a similar age.
Yeah, we're both 71 born, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we have kids in the same age. We have the same passion for naval history, wreck diving, rebreather. So actually, it's a pretty good match.
Yeah, absolutely. And and we're both obviously really interested in tonight's topic as well, which is rebreather bailouts. So I think what we agreed we'd do to start with is we would each just say a little bit about ourselves. We've already had a question earlier on asking what rebreathers we dive. So it might be useful to focus a bit on that as well. So do you want to go first, my friend?
Yeah. Yeah, just you're the host. You start with your introduction and your rebreather, and then I'll follow up.
Okay. Yeah. No. Fantastic. So I dive with an AP Inspiration. I have dived with one of those for a very long time. They're obviously a really kind of traditional, I guess, CCR model. Like most of them, mine has been upgraded through the years as AP have added different bits on. So that's what I dive with. Why do I dive with it? I guess because loads of reasons. The first thing is lots of people around me dive with the same model of unit, and that's really useful if you ever have any issues. But also, it's useful to have that kind of knowledge and experience around you as well. So if you encounter something, there's always somebody around who knows what's going on. AP obviously got fantastic support. I live very close to their factory. So I guess that's the reason that I dive an Inspiration. And I guess what sort of diving do I do? Well, anybody who's watched any of my videos will know my big thing is deep wreck exploration. And we're very fortunate where I live in the southwest of the United Kingdom is that the sea around us is just full of wrecks in that kind of sweet spot of 60 to 100 and something meters. So, and lots of the wrecks never been identified before. So that's what kind of flicks my switch. That's what the diving I do. Those are the gears that I use. That's the gear I use. I use. Okay, over to yourself then, Achim.
Yeah, well, actually, I agree with this point when you said a lot of people around you dive the same unit. That's the same thing here, and that's actually a key point. It's great if you dive in a team and everybody uses kind of the same equipment and knows the equipment of the other person, can help with spare parts, but also knows how to handle it in case there's something wrong. And so I'm diving a classic KISS for a very, very long time. And recently also started playing around with the Go, the Dive Talk Go, which is essentially a small KISS that is chest mounted and just, I don't know how many of you watch my stuff, but the last project I did in Italy, I used these both rebreathers, and that actually is already a good introduction for today's topic, because I basically used the second rebreather as a bailout option, because at a certain depth, the open circuit bailout was not a really doable option anymore. And yeah, my thing also, wreck diving. I also do cave diving and other stuff, but wrecks were always my main passion. And for me, it's mainly the Mediterranean. So I spend a lot of time on Elba in Italy. And I think I also said it in one of my videos. I think it's essential that you focus on a certain area where you can start to build relationships with locals and gain their trust, and become sort of a member of the community. And then suddenly you get all the information, and you can really dig deeper, so to speak, than trying to explore a new area every year and start from the beginning. So for me, it's Elba, and in the last couple of years, I found a couple of wrecks there that haven't been dived before. And so that's my thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say to anybody who's not watched your recent video or your videos on your projects or your project, it's incredible what you did there, recovering the bells and, kind of having the flexibility, I guess, to kind of extend your depth and everything in order to achieve your mission. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, fortunately, my wife's in a different room, so she... Yeah, but yeah, thank you very much for that. It was a pretty cool thing. But yeah, let's actually, there's plenty of questions coming in. So how do we gonna do this? Let me just see. Do we scroll back a little bit, or just do we take it from here, or?
I think we try and pick them up as we can. I mean, the first thing I would say is it's fascinating. I mean, I think somebody said there's 65 people listening into this, which is absolutely amazing. So I just want to say
at the moment. Yeah,
84. So it's absolutely brilliant. Thank you. And I'm also looking through the chat as well. Loads of people on different types of units as well. So fantastic. And different people from different parts of the world and everything. So it's just awesome. So thank you. I guess there's a couple of different questions. My daughter is on the chat, and she's sending out a little bit of abuse. So thank you very much, Faith. I think you're probably the youngest person on here, but that's great. And she said, what made me choose my rebreather? And so I've got to answer it because she's my daughter. So what made me choose it, Faith, is as you know, it's the rebreather I could get in without your mother being aware. So I guess what made you choose your KISS then, Achim?
So I did a lot of work for various rebreather manufacturers, wrote a couple of manuals, participated in some basically construction work. And so at some point I had 8 different units in the basement, and I realized that whenever I did a private dive, so not working on one of these machines just for myself, I always picked the KISS no matter what was available. And so that made me realize that it's a bulletproof machine. For me, it was always, you can travel wherever you want, you can break whatever you want on this machine, and there's nothing you can't fix with a Swiss Army knife and some duct tape. And that was an essential point for me. And for some reason, I just fell in love with this thing. It's super simple, and it really fits my philosophy of not the rebreathers making decisions that I have to control and supervise, but it just provides me with information that I can make the decision, so I'm in total control. And yeah, I mean, if you know me a little bit better in Innerspace Explorers and my background, that was the closest thing to what I'm doing open circuit.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of picks up nicely into one of the questions there was about ECRs versus MCCRs. And I guess that's your philosophy, isn't it, fundamentally, which is that you want to be the person who is making all the decisions, or you want to, you don't want to have decisions made for you, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So I obviously have quite a bit of experience on electronic rebreathers, but I realized and that's again, and this is essential to understand for this video. There's nothing that I'm doing better or I'm right or I'm wrong. It's just we have different approaches, and what I'm discussing here is just my very personal opinion, and that doesn't mean that it's good or better or whatever. It's just my personal belief. So
yeah, and I think that's a really important point, isn't it? I think there, which is
yeah,
that there's no right or wrong answers in this, is there? There's just different people's opinions and what different people are comfortable with and how people perceive risk and all those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, the manual rebreather is just, how should I explain that? I think people generally are lazy. So whenever and that's also myself. So when I started diving, for the last electronic rebreather that I dove a lot was a Hollis Prism 2. And so you start diving it and you're like, oh, okay, I'm running it manually, right? You put like 0.7 as an emergency set point. So if you're going beneath that, the machine's jumping in. But other than that, you're driving it manually, etc. And then you're doing pictures and you're looking at the wreck and you're exploring and you realize this thing's working. So even if you don't do anything and you get lazier and lazier and lazier and you start to rely more and more and more on this thing. And then I had this 110-meter dive penetrating a wreck, and I was in this restriction, and the visibility was 0, and then the solenoid got stuck. And that, for me, was the prime example of, like, in the worst possible situation, this thing's actually doing something that forces me to react. And I don't want to be forced to react. I want to be in charge, right? So my kiss is not doing anything. So if I would be in the same decision, that machine's not doing anything. So it's me, and I know, okay, I pressed that button like a minute ago. So I probably have another 10, 15 minutes where I don't have to do anything, and the machine's not doing anything creepy behind my back that I need to then react to. But that, again, this is me, and that's probably also based on a couple of really bad experiences.
Yeah, and to be honest, you know, we're all the product of our experiences and our backgrounds, aren't they? And I guess that brings me nicely on, because I obviously dive an electronic CCR, and so, you know, I have the, you know, not quite the decisions made for me, but I view it as important. I quite like having the task loading taken off me. So to drive a rebreather manually requires a high level of human input, and I guess my background is in the military. I flew helicopters, and the reality, if you're in that game, you ultimately, helicopters got more and more sophisticated, and you relied upon them taking a lot of the workload off you. And if without them doing that, they won't actually work. You know, you couldn't do it manually. So I guess I got into the habit of trusting equipment to effectively keep me alive. And for me, therefore, what I quite like is when I'm underwater, the rebreather, it's all like, you don't have to think to breathe, do you? On an electronic rebreather, you don't have to think to maintain the PO2. You then get a notification of when it's, you know, or you hope you get a notification of when it's not able to do that. So a different philosophy between us there. And I think if I'm not being task loaded, it means that capacity that I've got, I can be using to do other things. So, you know, I guess that's a philosophical difference between us, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I just described for the manual rebreather is basically just an extension of what I do open circuit. So, I mean, my open circuit diving is the same thing. I not use a computer because I think at some point you will start to rely on this computer. And for me personally, this is wrong. And I mean, you go on a dive boat somewhere in Egypt, let's say, and there's 20 divers, and you ask 20 divers in the middle of their dive, you take that computer away and tell them, like, okay, give me the status of your dive. So where are you? What's the next logical step to get out of this dive? 19 of them will be like, I have no idea. Give me that computer back. And that for me means that they just blindly rely on that piece of equipment. And I've seen quite a few of them fail terribly. So over these decades diving, I just got the habit of, like, tracking my dive on my own. And so I don't feel that to be some sort of bad task load or something that bothers me, so I can keep track of it, so I know how long am I in the water, what's my average depth, what's my next logical step. And I always have this little guy in the back of my head that's like, what could be the worst thing that can happen in the next second? What's waiting around the next corner for you? And a lot of people, when I'm talking to students about that, they're like, this is terrible. This must be a complete burden over the dive. But for me, it's more like a challenge, and it makes me prepared, right? And so obviously this open circuit, or this diving mentality in general, is just something that I applied on my rebreather diving.
Yeah,
and for me that works great.
Yeah, it's a really interesting philosophy. You know, and you know, I can absolutely understand why it will work for people like yourself. I'm just going to say, by the way, Bob has just sent us $5, which is really kind of you to do that, Bob. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Obviously, you know, we'll split that between us. We'll go and get a coffee or whatever. But yeah. It completely not necessary, but really appreciated. So thank you very much. Now, a few people are starting to ask some bailout questions as well, and a couple of people. Somebody's asked about the number of cylinders I carry. You know, they've seen in my videos that I only carry 2 cylinders, and I know that's another point on which we disagree, isn't it? You know, we take a different approach to this. So I guess I'll
disagree is a hard word for it. Again, it's just 2 different ways of approaching the same goal. It's
I mean, if I can talk through the approach that I use, and it's actually really common in this part of the world. Just so people understand it, and then maybe we'll get your view as well, so we can kind of do that contrast. So in this, I guess British Isles diving, and I do encompass the Irish teams in that one as well. By and large, we all have a similar philosophy to this. I mean, there are a few people who don't. Some of the GUE guys and stuff, they do different things, but by and large, most British Isles divers, 150 meter dives, whatever it is. They will carry 2 bailout cylinders, and they will normally have for the really deep stuff, you will normally have a deep mix each, and you will have a travel mix, or if you're a bit shallower, one person might have a travel mix and the other person might have a 50% or something like that. And we very much use a team bailout philosophy. So the idea is that in your team of 2 people, you will have enough gas to get back to about 50 meters. And if you're doing something really deep, you may blow off stops to get to 50 meters. So the idea is you get back to 50 meters, and then at 50 meters, you are calling for gas from the surface. So you will have seen that. Anybody who's watched my rebreather bailout video will have seen gas coming in. And I've done it on, several other dives as well. So typically for, a really deep dive, you will have probably 5 bailout cylinders on the boat. You will have a 50 meter gas. You will have 2 sort of 20 odd meter gases, and then you will have a 9 meter and a 6 meter gas, and possibly more of those. And our whole philosophy is about, because we're all in this idea of you get back to the shot, you get up, and then the gas comes in. So that is essentially our philosophy. And it is, there is a significant element of risk to that. And you can run what if scenarios. What if you don't get back to the shot? What if 2 divers have a problem? There are a number of what ifs that you can play with, those kind of things. But by and large, it's a philosophy that works pretty well. I've seen it work perfectly fine, as I say, on several occasions. But yeah. So that's ours. And if anybody wants to ask me some questions about that, I'm happy to pick them up. But first of all, I think we, go to yourself, Achim, for your kind of your approach, which is different.
Yeah. So just quickly, what you just described, I'm very familiar with. I had a very, very close friend that used to live in the Emirates for a couple of years, and we did a lot of diving there. And he was diving with a couple of guys. I think it was called the Abu Dhabi Desert Dive Club or something like that. And it was, they were all British divers, and they did some really, really deep, interesting stuff there. And so we did quite a bit of diving with them, and it was very, very interesting for me to see, because that was the first time I got really confronted with this type of philosophy. So my thinking is, yeah, it's different, because I think, or I mean, I want to be sure that whatever happens, I can go back to the surface from that spot where the problem starts on my own. So I mean, we all know, I mean, out of rebreather, out of gas between two rebreather divers is basically impossible to say, right? Because you have the rebreather, you have your bailout gas. I mean, normally you're out of rebreather because the machine has some sort of issue, it's flooded or CO2 breaks through or whatever. And then it's open circuit bailout. And so again, I'm very much oriented on what I would do open circuit. And the open circuit thinking is always based on a partner. So two people, one have a problem, and the problem is he has no gas, and then together reach the point where he can breathe his own gas again. This can be the surface or the first available decompression gas that he has on a stage, etc. And so the same thing is what I'm doing with my rebreather. So my thinking is, I'm at the deepest spot of my dive. My rebreather stops working for whatever reason. I have to switch to open circuit. I don't want to have to rely on somebody else and that this person is close to me or has the correct gas on it. I just want to pull a regulator and go on my deep bailout, and from there make it to my first decompression gas and then continue. So I always carry the amount of gas that I need to make it back to the surface, including all of my decompression. And so 4 cylinders, relatively diveable. So I have 2 on the left side and 2 in the leash. So I don't carry any stages on the right side, and that works quite nice for me. And if it's more than 4 stages, then I actually use a second rebreather, because that actually minimizes the issue dramatically. And that's what I did in the last dive, because when I calculated it the way I just described it, it would have been 8 bailout cylinders. And that's obviously something that you don't want to dive, because, I mean, obviously you can do that, like going down on a rope and going back up if you dive for numbers, which I don't do. But if you want to do something down there, obviously 8 cylinders is no option. And so the second rebreather obviously eliminates that issue, because if the rebreather fails, you take the second rebreather. And then I have 2 drive stages that each tank can drive both rebreathers. So I have 2 connections on each drive tank. And then obviously each rebreather has its own oxygen, and that makes it a very, very stable system and reduces the amount of gear to basically 2 cylinders, which I have again on the left side.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We're increasingly seeing guys using bailout rebreathers as well. You know, I think it's in a lot of respects it's an answer to the problem. I think for me personally, the cost is part of the reason I don't do that. I think one of the other things that I'd kind of highlight is bailout is one element of the risk that is facing a diver. You, I think, have just mentioned another element of risk, which is the ability to actually do anything when you've got mountains of kit. Now, for me, particularly diving around the British Isles, one of the key challenges that we face is always getting into the water, but actually the most difficult stage is getting out of the water. So right at the end of the dive, you know, if you've been under the water for 3, 4, maybe longer hours, and the situation has changed, so all of a sudden there's lots of waves and stuff. Hello, my son has just joined us. He wants to say hello to everyone. There you go. So if you have a large amount of kit, you know, 4 or 5 cylinders, for instance, getting out of a boat can be getting out of the water, even with a lift, even with a surface support team, can be particularly challenging. So, you know, and obviously you could say, well, you could just ditch gear, but clearly nobody's particularly wants to do that. And therefore, you know, you tend to, you know, people may push themselves to try and get out when they've got more kit than is you know, practical for doing that. Even with 2 cylinders and a rebreather and everything can be quite challenging. So I think, you know, whenever you talk about risk, you have to balance across risks, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, most of the time, I mean, the last couple of things I did, I was always alone. So it was a relatively small boat. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I mean, the huge difference, and I have a little bit of experience in British waters. So diving the Mediterranean is obviously a different topic, right? I mean, when I'm in my small boat, I have a couple of lines in the water, so I can put my equipment in the water, basically just take one rebreather, jump in, then get everything on myself, do my dive, come back, clip things on lines that are hanging from the boat, which in heavy current in the British Channel or somewhere is a total different story.
Yeah, absolutely. But
especially if it's more divers in the water, and if the boat captain has to collect 5, 6, 7 divers or whatever, that all surface more or less at the same time. I mean, that's a complete different.
yeah, absolutely. And one of the questions somebody asked is, when are we going to dive together? And obviously, you've got a standing invite, as you know, to come and dive on Dark Star. And if you can fit that into your schedule, that would be absolutely awesome, wouldn't it?
I will, definitely. It's on the plan. We just need to. I have a pretty crazy schedule because I'm not living from my diving, so I'm also running a workshop restoring boats and cars, classical stuff from the 70s and 80s, and I'm doing this alone. So being away always means spending money and not earning money, and then there's quite a bit of list of people waiting for stuff to be done, so I just have to squeeze it in somehow, but it's definitely on the list, so we'll make this happen. We will dive together. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, no, that would be fantastic. Another guy on the chat, sorry, I've forgotten your name, or I missed it, has asked me, what do you do if you lose a team? And it's a really good question. I mean, you should always try and stick together with your buddy. I guess in an ideal world, if you lose your buddy, you probably want to abort the dive and get back to the shot line. And as soon as, in the kind of diving I do, as soon as you get back to the shot line, there are going to be other divers on there somewhere, either above or below you. Always going to be the case. But what you're into, I think, is once you start getting into double failures, then most safety systems fall apart. Most rebreathers, for instance, can't cope with double failures. So it's something to, what you have to do is, if you have a single failure, it's very rare to get 2 failures right on top of each other. What you have to do is, when you get the first failure, i.e. you lose your buddy or your rebreather stops working, you have to make sensible decisions. That's my kind of view.
Yeah, same here. I made a video quite a bit a while ago, and it was like how to avoid the spiral of death or something like that. Can't remember the exact name, but that's the thing. So I always plan for one problem, and then you need to solve the problem. And if it's something that you cannot fix, like, okay, then it's working again. Like, you have a loose first stage, that's a problem that you need to fix, but it doesn't make you abort the dive, right? Because you fix it, it's good. But something that requires to abort the dive, I mean, there's this one problem, you fix it or you solve it, and then if something else comes up, then usually that's the real bad moment. So I had one of these where I was actually losing 2 bailout gas, or 2 bailout gases, basically, or 2 decompression gases in a row, which then was not good, so to speak. I mean, I'm still here, but the problem, you have to accept a certain amount of risk. I mean, when you go diving, there's always, if you don't want to drown, don't go in the water. But if you start getting into this thinking, like, okay, if my bailout solution fails, I need a bailout solution for the bailout, it becomes undiveable at some point. That's like in the 80s, when this technical diving thing started. And when you look at old magazines like Aquacorps or so, you see these funny pictures of these people with 10 cylinders with 2 valves on each cylinder and 2 full regulator sets on each of these valves, and they look like Christmas trees. And the thinking obviously was like, okay, the more stuff I take with me, the safer I am, right? You have a light and a backup light and a backup light for the backup light, etc., etc. And you can, I mean, get that to a really absurd amount of items. But at the same time, I mean, each of these items is a certain task load. You have to store it, you have to be able to reach it, to take it off, to take it back, etc. And the numbers also showed that the more stuff people took, it was not that the accidents became less, actually the accident rate increased. And that clearly showed the problem. And then, I mean, I don't want to go too much into dive history now, but this is when the Hogarthian system then also got in the diving, in the thinking of the divers, where I was like, okay, reduce the amount of stuff, keep it simple, right? Take only what you need and really rethink what do you need. And this is the philosophy that I still stick to it. So have a proper plan in the first place, which helps you to avoid issues in the first place, and then have a proper solution for a problem. And if you have one, solve it and then get out of the water.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the chat, Richard has just made exactly that point: risk mitigation versus risk removal, and that's absolutely true. You know,
Yeah.
mountains of kit is not in itself, you know, in itself creates problems. It's a really important point there. So, you know, I think we're both advocating the same thing, isn't it? Which is, you know, to think through your solution, make sure it works, and if you have a problem, deal with it. Don't ignore it. And whatever that solution is, you know, that you believe is acceptable and you feel is manageable for your situation, then you know, that's it, isn't it? But as you said, you have to accept that diving carries with it a risk. And, you know, there is no doubt the deeper you go, the longer you stay down, the greater the risk, because that's, you know, simple,
Absolutely.
you know, the way it is, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, what you just said with the you cannot overload with bailout equipment. I mean, you being a pilot in an aircraft, and I always use this example in my classes. I had a transatlantic flight years ago, and there was one of the engines. There was 4 engines on that plane, and one of them was burning, and they shut it off. And a lot of people in the plane freaked out. And then after everything was okay, so the engine stopped burning, and the captain actually went through the plane and calmed down people and was like, hey, relax, we have 4 engines, 3 are still working, all is good, we don't even have to turn around, we continue to the States, etc., etc., etc. And this one lady was like, and what if the second one fails? And he was like, even with 2, we can still make it, don't worry, don't worry. And she was like, and what if all 4 fail? And he was like, and that's the point. I mean, at some point, it's just over. I mean, at some point, you're running out of options, and that is something you have to accept.
Yeah, absolutely right. No, absolutely right. We've got a few more questions here. There's a question: have you ever suffered a CO2 hit? Now, I haven't had a CO2 hit, but I know people who have had them, and my understanding is they're absolutely horrendous. And so, yeah, definitely one to be avoided, I think.
It's an interesting experience. You're missing something.
Tell us about. Yeah, no, I don't want one. Thanks. Tell us about yours.
I had a few. Yeah. I mean, but to understand that a little bit better, I did quite a bit of engineering on rebreathers. So I was building certain experimental units. I was diving a lot of experimental units. So I had 2 severe ones on experimental stuff, and I had one bad one on a KISS actually. And yeah. It was a cold water dive, and it was one of these old BOVs, which have these yellowish rubber pieces as one-way valves. And we figured out later on that when they get really cold, they actually roll up. So which is not good. And I couldn't really figure out what the problem was. And we came out, it was actually in a mine in Germany. So 4 degrees water temperature. And I took it up. There was no directional gas flow anymore, so we put it outside. And I think I put it on the engine hood of my car, and you could actually watch these like go up again. I was like, that's interesting. So I put it back inside 4 degrees, and you could see doing this again.
Yeah.
So that was actually the only real one that I ever had using a normal rebreather. But yeah, interesting experience.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. Another question's come in here. Somebody quite a while back. Asked me if I dived on the go. Now, I've not dived on the go, but I've obviously watched the videos, and it seems like a really interesting unit. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I'll come to England and then we dive it together. Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't want to put this into a marketing thing, but as I have one and I dive it and I dove mine to 170, I can tell you it's a fantastic rebreather. And for me, the main thing is, and a lot of people ask me, like, oh, so you took the Go as the bailout rebreather on that dive, and actually the Classic was the bailout rebreather, so I was on the Go, and that is because it's the way best breathing rebreather I ever had. Unbelievable. So the breathing resistance is non-existing, and if you compare it to the Classic, which I really like, the Classic is horrible in a direct comparison. So yeah, you need to check it out at some point. It's interesting, and yeah, maybe we can do this together. Would be awesome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm definitely up for that. There's another question here. Sort of a thing, I guess, an observation. Simon Mitchell says divers are better at recognizing things like hypoxia if they've experienced it previously in a controlled environment. Interestingly enough, I have experienced hypoxia. So part of flying training is clearly hypoxia. If you go up too high, then you become hypoxic. And therefore, it's one of the things they do is to show us how dangerous it is. So the opposite to a recompression chamber, they actually have special chambers that can reduce the pressure and therefore reduce the PO2. And what they did was they got us to do some fairly simple manual tasks with normal PO2. Then they took us up to, I don't know, 20 or 25,000 feet, I think it was, got us to repeat the same tasks. Then they brought us back down again and said, how were you? And I remember thinking, yeah, no problems at all. I can absolutely cope with that. And you've written something on a board. They get you to turn over the board, and mine was just like somebody, like a spider, a drunken spider had wandered all over it. It's absolutely incredible. It made me realise how insidious and how dangerous and how horrendous hypoxia is. I'm sure anybody who's been a rebreather diver for a while will know people who've ended up, very sadly dying. In hypoxic events, and it is really easy to see. So it is the thing that scares me most really about diving, or worries me most about diving a rebreather. And it's why, religiously the thing I do before every dive is check the low PO2 alarm on my unit. And the Inspiration's got a visual one and it's got an audio one as well. And I make sure that's working, because I've seen how horrendous it can be. And it's really easy when you hear about people who've gone in with O2 cylinders turned off and all those kind of things. It's really easy to see how it can catch them unawares.
Yeah. So there were two. So I mean, generally, back in the day, also that always sounds a bit stupid. I ran through this training where in the end of the course, we removed the scrubber, went back in the pool and were swimming against the wall to experience CO2 hit, which was pretty ugly and brought us some nasty headache for the evening. So I understand the concept and the point of it, but I would not do it in my courses, like on purpose harm somebody. Is like, ugh. And I also know people that on purpose tried this hypoxic thing, and I really want to tell you, don't try this. So I can remember, so when we did this, like breathing a 1080, sitting on the couch, and then you pass out and somebody else giving you an oxygen mask, nonsense like that. Trained that way through another agent rebreather, and till a doctor came up and said, like, you guys know that 1 out of 100 people doing this falls into coma and is not coming back, so I recommend you stop this crap. And that's exactly what we did. And so don't do it. It's really, really stupid. And so I don't forget it, somebody was asking here, let me just scroll back a little bit. Why do DRR agencies, exceptional ISE, not have focused curriculum on wreck diving? Yeah, okay, now I see, because we have a wreck diving curriculum, and that's like equal to, I mean, we have expedition diving, trimix diving, and then cave, and then wreck. So we have that.
Is that kind of like when we talk about wreck, you talk about penetration there? Is that what you're referring to? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's in 3 levels, and the second, I mean, the first one has a little bit of penetration, but especially level 2 is basically focusing on penetration.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So hopefully that picks up the question there from Richard. There's also a question here about BOVs versus DSVs. Personally, I got rid of my BOV probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and the reason I got rid of it was because I found that they were more trouble than they were worth. So I would often get leaking and those kind of things. So there's quite a lot of maintenance, but also I think for me the simplicity of having a DSV was quite important. And I've bailed out probably, I don't know, 5 times maybe in different scenarios, and I've done a lot of bailout training, obviously, but for real, I've probably bailed out 4 or 5 times. And I've never found the need to have a BOV. I've always been entirely happy. And obviously the breathing on a normal open circuit regulator is always going to be better than on a BOV, and you don't have to go through all the hassle of plugging in different gases and all that kind of stuff. So that's my kind of rationale. I don't know where you stand, Achim.
Actually, I have it's great, because I mean it would be super boring if we look at this the same way. So I'm actually a big fan of the BOV, but it depends a little bit of how it is set. I saw people like having to bail out in shallower water and then having deep gas connected to the BOV. So it requires a little bit of thinking when you set it up. But I like this sanity breath. So if you ever been on a really bad CO2 breakthrough or something like that, or you get a flooding and you get some a caustic cocktail in your mouth or something like that, and you need to breathe now, and then you have to figure out which of these 5 regulators is the one that I need. I like the opportunity of having a proper breath, clearing my mouth, clearing my mind, and then making an educated decision. But that's, again, maybe because I've been in this situation and I didn't like it at all. And then it obviously depends a little bit on the rebreather. So, for example, on the Go, I don't have a BOV, because the Go you clip on your regular gear, which means I have my necklace hanging here, and I have the DSV from the Go here, and it's so small and tiny that a BOV is probably like bigger than the entire rebreather, right? So, and then it's just like this, and I mean, it's the right gas. It's my diluent, yeah. And unless you do something super crazy, deep, stupid, like I heard some people did in somebody did in Italy, that's a great choice. And if you've seen my video, I had this little throw up session on the way up from this deep one, and actually there was the same thing. I mean, I switched on my classic because I had the BOV, because when you start to throw up in a BSV, that's not a good idea. So you want to go on an open circuit regulator, which means you have a gas switch. So if you're on a BOV, you can just put it on open circuit, and that solves the problem. At least it solved it for me.
Yeah. Okay. So interesting. 2 different philosophies there again, and both with our own reasons for doing it. We've got another question. Actually, it kind of ties in with this. This question, we got a question about whether to have bottom bailout on a necklace or clipped off like a long hose. I actually do neither of those. I have all my regulators effectively tucked in on my stage where they're not going to get caught or anything. And if I need one of them, I mean, I guess one of the things, the differences between us is I don't have 5 cylinders to choose from. I've got 2 cylinders to choose from, and therefore it's really easy. I have one on the left and one on the right. So if I'm deep, I'm going to have the one on the left, and if I am shallower, then I'm probably going to have the one on the right. So, but in both cases, I'm going to have to get the DV from being kind of clipped onto not clipped onto the cylinder, but kind of secured to the side of the cylinder. So that's what I'm doing. And I guess you just talked there, haven't you, about having it around your neck with the go?
Diving the goal is on the neck, yeah. And if I'm on the classic KISS, it's on the BOE, because then I normally don't run my diluent from the little cylinder on the back, but I have run it from the stage directly, and that means I don't even have to pull the regulator because the gas is connected to the block, and that means I switch to open circuit, and that's it.
Yeah, no, absolutely fine. So there's a question here: what made you jump from open circuit to closed circuit? How long ago was it? For me, I actually never really did that much open circuit trimix diving, deep stuff. So I guess I went straight onto, from a rebreather. I went straight to I took my rebreather and then just kind of kept on going deeper with it. So that was me. You're obviously very different. You've been doing this a lot longer than I have in terms of the deep stuff.
My first rebreather was an oxygen rebreather, and that was when I was 11 years old. So that was my first rebreather experience. But like real rebreather diving, I think 1990. That was more like curiosity. So it was back and forth. I was just playing around different units. So one of the first people that I ever had contact with that like, hey, do you want to try this, was Billy Deans in Key West while I used to live in the States. So, but again, yeah, not really because I needed it or I dove it regularly. It was really just testing out different units and like sucking in more knowledge, because I was super lucky to be at this place where all of this happened, so to speak, at the right time, and had the chance to talk to all these amazing people and learn from them. And then back in Germany, we started to do some deep exploration dives on aircraft wrecks in a lake here, and I was freezing to death. And that was the main reason when I then started to really switch to rebreather, because I was looking for ways to stay a little bit warmer. So cold was always my biggest issue. I basically froze my hands as a teenager to a point where they were almost taking off some of the fingers, which they didn't, fortunately, but it's still an issue. So when I get cold, that's the nastiest thing that can happen to me. And so the prime reason for switching to a rebreather for me was staying warmer.
Okay.
And then obviously, I mean, all the other benefits kicked in, and that made me stay on the rebreather. But I have to say, I still like to dive open circuit a lot.
Oh man, clearly your business must be doing pretty well then. If you dive in trimix.
Yeah, I mean, when the helium prices got ridiculous a couple of years ago, that obviously means, I mean, I'm not diving open circuit trimix anymore, because that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, but I generally, because I know there's people out there that simply only dive rebreather. So I have quite a few students and fellow divers that sold their open circuit gear. They're like, yeah, maybe if I go to the Maldives for a trip with my wife, I might use a single tank configuration, but everything else is rebreather. And that for me is not the case. I really like rebreathers. I have quite a few flying around here. And I sometimes, it's a little bit like going to the garage and starting one of these old timers and going for a ride. I sometimes like to take one of the more ancient rebreathers and go for a dive, because I just like to dive it. And so obviously I always use it for the deep stuff, but for recreational diving, I still do a lot of open circuit stuff.
Yeah, no worries. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I misunderstood you there, I'm afraid. We've got a question here. Why don't we push PO2 higher than 1.6 during decompression? And I guess the answer to that is, I think the whole oxygen toxicity thing is not particularly well understood. But what people do know is that the higher the PO2, the more likely you are of having a seizure. And the general view appears to be that, somewhere about 1.3 to 1.5, 1.6, that's about the right level. If you go much more than that, especially if you're underwater, then the risk becomes intolerable. I mean, that's my kind of understanding, my view on it.
Yeah, I mean, that clearly means you're pushing it. And I mean, while on open circuit, I mean, you go to 1.6 in your decompression. I mean, depending a little bit of what you did before. I mean, on the rebreather, usually running a higher PO2 during the dive means you have a higher accumulation of CNS, which also means that you normally don't decompress with 1.6, but with 1.5, just to save a little bit on the CNS loading. So definitely not above 1.6.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one thing we both absolutely agree on, isn't it? An oxygen hit underwater is pretty horrendous. That's up there with a list of things that you don't want to happen. So another question about hydrating while you are diving. Now, I don't know about you, but I never drink or eat underwater. Having said that, though, my kind of longest dive is kind of 4.5 hours. I'm absolutely limited on. I have this kind of maybe a bit of a confession time. I have this mental block where even though I've got a suit and I've got all the bits and pieces equipped and everything, I really struggle to urinate underwater. So what I don't want to be doing is making that even worse. And often I come out and it's really quite uncomfortable. So I don't drink underwater. I don't eat underwater. How about yourself?
Normally, no. So even on the last one, which was 6.5 hours, I didn't bring any drinks. When I did the channel crossing, I actually had two 2-liter drinking bags, like these camel bags, what you call them, where you have like a hose that you can squeeze with your teeth and then drink. So I had 2 of these mounted on the scooter and I used them.
Okay.
But other than that, and I mean, I know obviously people that do long cave dives and then sit hours and hours somewhere decompressing, they use drinks, but and also sometimes to get warm. So I know that people that decompress in habitats and stuff, that they start to drink hot tea and stuff like that, which I think is quite smart. But on the type of diving I do, that's normally not necessary.
Yeah, absolutely, and me too as well. I mean, there's loads of reasons why you don't want to be diving for much longer than kind of 4 or 5 hours if you're doing sea dives, in tidal streams and all those kind of things. So that's kind of our limit. There's another question here about narcosis at depth on mixed gases. How does that compare to narcosis at the bottom end of recreational depths? Well, I mean, that's a really easy one to pick up, which is that you choose a sensible gas, and the advantage of a rebreather is that the difference in cost between a really good helium mix and one that's not quite so good is so small as not to be worth messing around with. So you can do a 130-meter dive with a equivalent narcotic depth of 15 meters or something like that, which is sensible for all sorts of reasons, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So my rule of thumb is also the deeper I go, the less the equivalent narcotic depth should be. So on the last one that I did, I used Heliox 6, so narcosis was really almost non-given. And you actually start to appreciate that if something happens at that depth and you have to react, and you realize you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the interesting things we've noticed is lots of the wrecks around us were first dived by people maybe 20 or 25 years ago, and they were all diving they were either diving air or really, really weak trimix. And because of that, they would do a dive and they would come back up and they would record what they found. And we've got the records. They're published on RecSite. And you go and dive the wreck and you're like, this is completely different to what is written down. And the reason is those people, those pioneers, were doing these 70 or 80-meter dives, and they were completely narked. So they just, they missed everything. We can go back with much better mixes, and all of a sudden everything is clear and you can see everything. And that's just a really sensible thing to do, isn't it?
Absolutely. I have had a scary experience in the Baltic Sea doing a 50, 52, 53-meter wreck dive. And there was a TV team on board, and it was an air dive. And I was filming, so they just needed somebody to film underwater for them. So I was filming for, I think, 35 minutes or so. And I came back up, and this guy with the microphone was there. And I was like, okay, Achim, tell our viewers, how was the dive? And I was like, yeah, it was crap. The visibility was bad. I didn't see anything. And the guy was super disappointed and asked me a couple of times, so there must have been something. So tell me. And then afterwards, we watched the video, and I found the steering helm of this wreck with the compass and everything in place. And I was filming it for, I think, 8 minutes straight. And when I got back to the surface, I couldn't remember it. So I saw it the first time on the video, and that really made me scratch my head. It was one of those moments where I was like, this Trimix is something you need to try.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the thing. So I've just got a question here from Wade, who wants to know how he does the kind of diving that I do. Well, I don't know your particular circumstances, Wade, but what I would say, mate, is first thing you need is qualifications. Then you need the experience, and what you really need is to know the right people. So I don't know where you are in the UK, if you're in the UK, if you're somewhere else, but drop me a message and let us know where you are and you know your details and everything. I'll offer you a bit more tailored advice. So, but you know, we all started somewhere, and I know people who've come from, you know, Mod 1 qualified, you know, even not even being Mod 1 qualified, and some of them are on boats with some of the stuff that I do now. So, you know, it's a lot of it is about being willing to put yourself out there, I would say. Don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Achim?
No, definitely. You need to find somebody that you trust, that you like, and that takes you under your wing. That's the best way of getting started with this type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We've only got a couple. You know, I think we said we'd do this for about 60 minutes, and we're kind of getting up onto that. What I say is we take one more question, and then we knock it on the head there. But we can always do it again, I guess, if people think it's a good idea. So
definitely. I saw interesting here. Have you experienced bad gas mixes? That's a good one.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, for certain. Interesting enough, on air, of course. That's where bad gas mixes come from, isn't it? Who hasn't had a bad air fill from, you know, somebody stuck the inlet from the compressor next to a car or, you know, something else, and yeah, you do an air dive and, you know, you come up with an absolutely banging headache that won't shift for what seems like forever. You know, that's my kind of bad gas. I've also I've done that thing where I mean, probably the worst one I saw was not me, but there was a guy I was diving with. We were diving, I think, somewhere in the Middle East, and for whatever reason, we had a 15-litre cylinder of oxygen on board the boat, and it may have been the one that we were going to use if somebody got bent or something like that. Anyway, all the cylinders got mixed up. A guy was about to go in the water on, I think, a 30-metre dive, and I was like, and it wasn't well marked, the cylinder. I was like, mate, have you analysed that gas? And he's like, nah, it'll be fine. I said, right, I'm not 100% certain. So we analysed it, and he was about to do a 30-metre dive with a 100% cylinder of oxygen. Now that's a bad gas.
Yeah, that would have been the last one. Yeah. I mean, these bad air fills I experienced obviously also a couple of times, especially places like Egypt or so. I mean, there was this time where you did a lot of like this camel diving, so they transported everything somewhere and then like filling with a fuel-driven compressor and stuff like that. But I also had quite a few scary ones with Trimix that was either filled by people and it was really crappy. Like you ask for a 2135 and you get some 2815 or something, and you're like, this is completely not usable, which is not an issue because you analyze your gas. The scariest one that I had, and that might be interesting for people out there also mixing themselves, I had a helium tank delivered that had 16% oxygen.
Okay. How did that happen?
So I mixed it. Yeah, I don't know how it happened. I think it was balloon gas somehow, because there is something in Germany that balloon gas has to have a certain amount of oxygen. So if children play with it, it has a certain amount of oxygen to not kill somebody. But I was mixing like a 1080 or so, checked my gas and was like, this is really off. And I was like, what did I do wrong? And then I, at some point, analyzed the helium tank and figured out there's something terribly wrong. And since that, I always analyze the storage tanks that I get in. And so never happened again, but it was interesting because I never expected that to be a possibility.
Yeah, interesting. Somebody, Dave just observed that he's had 80-20 when he asked for O2. So I mean, clearly it's not just you. I think we've got to pick this one up. We've got Dive Talk in the chat who've asked us what's keeping more divers from getting into rebreathers and what can they do to remove those blockers. So we'll pick that one up as a last question, seeing as though we got some real celebrities on the in the live stream. I don't know. For me, I think there's a load of different things. I think you've got to say cost is the first one, haven't you?
Yeah.
You know, difficult to argue against cost, but also I think probably perceptions of complexities versus benefits. So, you know, do people think that dealing with the complexities, are the benefits worth it? So I know a load of people have tried to do that. And, you know, to try and overcome that, you mentioned obviously the Hollis as just one example of that. And there's loads of other examples of it, isn't there? And I don't think anyone's quite hit that sweet spot yet. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe the Go will. I don't know. I guess it's about getting enough of that kind of momentum, isn't it? And convincing people that this is the way ahead. These things aren't terrible. They're not going to kill you. What they're just going to do is make your diving so much better.
Yeah, I think you already said it. This how much benefit do you get for the cost and for the trouble, if you want to call it trouble. So if somebody is just like diving once a month in the 50-meter range, it's probably not worth getting a rebreather. I mean, just when you see cost versus benefit. If you dive a lot deep, like you do, obviously, like every weekend, and then actually the rebreather is actually a cost saver, because I mean, yeah, it's quite an investment, but in the long term, you're saving quite a bit of money. When you calculate how much.
That, by the way, you should definitely tell her that.
A good argument. Yeah, I mean, think about it. I mean, when you think about the dives you do over a year, and you would calculate how much money that would be in helium costs, I mean, the rebreather is a real bargain.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I mean, it really depends where you're diving, what you're diving, and then to pick the right unit. I mean, somebody just mentioned here again the Go, and I mean, the huge benefit of that machine is that it really is way less cost intense than some. I don't want to name anything, but some crazy ECCR where you spend 10 grand just for the machine or something like that, and it's quite capable, as I can tell you from my personal experience. But again, I don't want to make this a marketing thing. Everybody knows that I like this rebreather and that I dive it, but there is alternatives out there, and I think you really need to tailor it to the person and the needs behind.
Yeah, no, for certain. So I guess on that point there, should we bring things to a close? I mean, there's a whole load of people, you know, who've been commenting and have been, you know, joining in and listening to us and everything. I just want to say thank you very much to everyone. You know, I think
thank you.
We'll do it again, I think, sometime.
Yeah, actually, I mean, we should talk after this video anyway, but I think there's plenty of questions here that we did not answer. So my suggestion would be that we find time and make a video together answering these questions, not a live one, but just putting that out again so all these questions are answered. And then, yeah, I mean, to all the people watching, if you have things you want us to discuss, then tell us. And from my side, I'm totally happy to do this even as a regular thing, because I think everybody can learn from that. Also myself, it's always interesting to talk to other experienced divers and also see what questions are out there that we can answer, and if we can make it a little bit safer for anybody or a little bit more interesting or get somebody into this, then it's worth the time.
Yeah, absolute certain, and we'll definitely do that. We'll put together another video with any questions we've missed, and if we have missed your question, guys, I'm really sorry about that. Obviously, the live stream has been going. We've been talking away, but we will go back and we'll reanalyze it, and we'll make sure that every question that you put on there is asked. And if you've got any more afterwards, please just drop either of us a message. Just like to, we'll certainly deal with it. But we hope you've enjoyed it. And on that note, I think I will say good night to everyone.
Yeah, happy Easter to everyone. Thank you, Dom, for hosting this and the time. And thanks everybody for watching, and looking forward to do this again.
Yeah. Okay. Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Just need to figure out how to end it now.
Yeah, good one. I think you have to end it. I can't.
Yeah, no. It's on here somewhere. I just don't know where. Bloody hell. I sorted out everything else apart from this.
There's a button on the left. Yeah.
Yeah, let's turn off my camera, I think. There we go.